When we talk about important video game milestones, we often bring up the NES, the N64, the PlayStation, and even in terms of failure, the Sega Saturn was a pretty large event. All of these things contributed to how games are now, and so did the Xbox 360. In fact, in a lot of ways, aside from the fact that these consoles were the forerunners to the medium, the 360 defines so many of the norms in video games today. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx we ask the question, why was the Xbox 360 a big deal? When the Xbox 360 launched in 2005, there's one very notable thing that could have very well stopped it from getting anywhere. And that's a circle, red circle. A red circle that wasn't even actually a full circle, it was 3/4 of a circle. And a lot of the original Xbox 360 models had this 3/4 red circle around the power button after not a really long period of time. This was the LED indication for general hardware failure, and in many ways, it seemed like a kiss of death. But Microsoft didn't handle this badly per se. Where their warranty was for a year, they extended that warranty to 3 years and replaced any system that had any of these problems, and was also actively trying to fix it. The Xbox 360 Slim and Xbox 360E do not have this problem, at least at the rate that the original does. And the refurbished models that they sent out contained various measures such as epoxy on certain chips to keep them from moving if there was an overheat, and the crop of replaced 360s generally didn't have the same kinds of problems. They weren't perfect, but they were a lot better. Generally, the handling of this situation is looked at as pretty damn good. It seemed at the time to be really inconvenient and borderline idiotic that they would put out a product that failed at such a rate. There is no way in their testing they didn't run into some problems. And to an extent, I think they did learn something from doing that. Namely, it doesn't matter how much you can replace it, don't let it screw up like that in the first place. Which, if you're looking at the Xbox One and the consoles it has spawned, there has never been a problem like that at all. The quality assurance has gone way up, and it's probably due to the fact that they had to do a lot to keep customers satisfied after the Red Ring of Death. Previous to the Xbox 360, the Xbox itself was kind of just a mishmash of PC parts, and Microsoft has never really been a hardware maker, so while the original Xbox kind of didn't actually have any problems like this, they didn't try to pack it into a small box by any means, and they put some pretty hefty fans in it. When they actually tried to engineer a smaller console, it created problems that they dealt with. In that respect, the Xbox 360 was not only a big failure, but a big learning experience. But that's pretty much the only failure as far as the Xbox 360 goes. In basically every other way, the Xbox 360 was the ideal hardcore console gamer's console. Where Sony does have a lot of great exclusives to their systems, there were two things that they really just didn't have going for them. The PlayStation 3 was being priced at $599. Xbox 360 beat that with its premium model, coming in at $399, but they also sold a core model for $299. The PlayStation 3 just could not compete with that. And once the PlayStation 3 launched, the online services for the console would be, well, bad. Like, just not good at all. On the other hand, Xbox Live had been going on the Xbox for a while and was great. In every way, it was a superior online service, it was easy to use, and the experience could basically be straightforward ported to the next console. As long as it didn't lose any functionality, that was pretty much what people wanted out of it. It's not as if the PlayStation 2, for instance, was incapable of online, but right now, in your head, you're saying to yourself, wait, did the PlayStation 2 have online? Seriously, I don't know. It did, but it sucked. And the Xboxes didn't suck, and the Xbox 360s continued that tradition of not sucking. But why have online if you don't have a ton of games that work really well with online gaming? And the Xbox 360 had a lineup of shooters that just cornered that market entirely. And oftentimes the $600 PlayStation 3 would have those same games, but they would look worse. This is something that people didn't really understand. The significantly cheaper console was given the better graphics. This was due to something very smart that Microsoft did that everybody is now doing. Between the GPU and the CPU on the Xbox 360, RAM is unified. That means the same RAM gets used for both graphics and computing. The PlayStation 3, which was double the price of the core model, split the memory between the GPU and CPU, so each had their specific dedicated memory, and this meant there was a hard limit on both. With the Xbox 360, adjustments could be made as to how much RAM was being used. If there was an area that required more RAM than 256 megabytes, obviously it could handle that, and that made a huge difference. Though the game is good on either console, let's say you boot up Bayonetta on both of them and have a look at the games. Not only are the graphics better on the Xbox 360, it runs better for the most part, because the PlayStation 3's memory can't be adjusted, and because a lot of games were developed for the Xbox 360, not only because it was technically better as far as its RAM architecture goes, but mainly because it was more powerful and closer to the Windows development environment. PlayStation 3 ports were often just downgraded in graphics to avoid a massive increase in the labor budget. The easiest solution is often the solution a publisher will ask the developer to use, and in this case it resulted in games with worse graphics on the more powerful system. This is why it's important to note that it's not always sheer numbers that makes a system have better graphics. The architecture of the PlayStation 3 is kind of a mess, and the architecture of the Xbox 360 is not. But perhaps the most important contribution to gaming that the Xbox 360 made is not in its hardware or its gaming software, but rather in its OS. Way back in the days of the arcade, there used to be a little thing called a high score. Having the high score was a point of pride. People attempted to get to it all of the time. They displayed it proudly and enjoyed showing off what they had done. It was a collective experience, whereas the experience of scores had moved more locally, more individually. Something that we all had inside our house, certainly. Certain games would keep track of the score, and sure, you could be the best in your house, but ultimately that didn't really matter outside of the confines of your home. And then achievements came along. The Xbox 360 launched with achievements. In 2005, people weren't necessarily sure what this was, but as they played the game, there were little messages popping up saying achievement unlocked. You beat the final boss, or you played the game for X amount of hours in a row, or you found a thing that's hard to find. As you unlocked achievements, you gained points which were attributed to a profile that was public, and between friends would often have a little friend network between them, and people would compare these scores, which were called gamer scores. This created score leaderboards that were a lot more different. They were not restricted to one game. They were not restricted to one genre even. If you were the gamer with the most gamer points in the group of friends, well, that was some kind of bragging rights for sure. And this drove everyone to play games more, even people who weren't actually competing with each other. Just completionists, people who liked the idea of getting everything in the game, had a number of rewards simply for continuing to do that type of thing. It was no longer just a 100%, the game was congratulating you along the way for completing various things. In a lot of ways, this was very good, and certainly contributed to fun as long as the achievements were kept within responsible limits, but there were some kind of absurd ones, like in Viva Pinata there was an achievement for playing 50 hours straight. So there are a few things with achievements you have to care about that do attribute to the sort of addiction that a game can provide. I certainly don't like to pin it down specifically to games, but the kind of encouragement you got from achievements like that did encourage it in gamers. Despite the fact you can get addicted to pretty much any experience, using achievements irresponsibly did send a lot of people down rabbit holes. That being said, achievements did so much for making games into a measurable experience that could be compared with other gamers, which games have been inherently competitive since their creation. Not just video games, games in general. Achievements are such a big achievement in gaming, and all of the other things we talked about, from the RAM architecture to the price, to simply the good public relations of the Red Ring of Death that maybe took a little bit longer than they should have, but ultimately ended up teaching a very valuable lesson to the company, to a company that sometimes seems to really need more lessons than most. See the Xbox One DRM thing for an example of that. Still, the Xbox 360 changed gaming. You are feeling the effects of the achievement system every time you log in to any game now. While it certainly wasn't come up with specifically by Microsoft, they cemented it. They popularized it. If they hadn't done that, yes, it may have happened later somewhere else, or even on another Microsoft console. But that was the turning point. Everything had to have achievements from that point forward, or it seemed old. And ultimately, that's what the Xbox 360 did. It ushered in a new era where a lot of things needed to be done, or it just seemed old. We've seen constant evolution since, and it will no doubt never stop. But we have to recognize the place that the Xbox 360 holds as a turning point for a lot of the behaviors and ideas that we have in gaming. What was your favorite game on Xbox 360? Leave us a comment. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.